My name is Bob Saudelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today's program will focus on the Central Street neighborhood. We are pleased to welcome Mr. Lidio Donato, Mr. Otto Palazzi, and Mr. Alphonse Pimerini, three gentlemen who will tell us a great deal today about growing up on Central Street. And first, we want to locate the specific area in which they grew up. There's no neighborhood sign. There is one way down at the south end, and there are signs in other sections of the town, but we're going to focus today on a very specific section of Route 12. Between the Terrace area and Lincoln Terrace area and what is known as the Bowery area near Tisdale Street. A very, very focused area. And actually, Allie, in our little chit-chat at the beginning, you said it would be between CVS
on the corner of Graham and Central,
and
down as far as where the Tucker building is.
Where the Tucker building is.
Where the State Road starts.
Okay, so between the current day CVS,
right,
which was where the Horn Supply used to
right,
be.
Years ago, right.
And the Tucker building, and then the State Road starts right beyond that.
Beyond that, yeah.
Just a very, this is a good place since we're mentioning the State Road. The road is straight there, but
that's right.
When you fellas were growing up, Otto, what did the road used to...
The road went around the hill, and the old road's still there. I don't know what the name of it is, but when they redid the highway, they went straight up the hill to straighten that curve up.
Straight up, but that road
the old
still
road
is there,
still there,
and there are houses still along
There's
that
some
road.
houses,
There's still some houses.
And then, Lydia, it comes out by the Meadowbrook mobile home
by
park.
the brook down there.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you gentlemen grow up? When were you children during during that period? Now I'm going to defer to Otto because I think you are you're still young.
The oldest,
We're all young at heart.
Well, I was born on Central Street. The house is not there anymore. It's the shopping center there across from the gas station.
Yeah.
And I lived there, grew up to my teen years. Then I moved to Union Street.
And
but I grew up there, born and raised on Central Street.
And I am proud to say, I have to, for full disclosure here, Otto is my first cousin.
Yes,
and,
your father and my mother were brother and sister.
Yes, and my dad, that house, and Eldina, and his parents, and yes.
They always spent a lot of time together, your mother
Yes.
and father, my folks. Yeah,
and wonderful.
Yeah, good memories.
Sure. And now, Lidio and Al, you're very close in age, I think.
Yeah.
Across the street neighbors.
Across the street neighbors.
Yeah.
And in those days when we were small and we wanted to play with each other, we never thought of looking for traffic. We just would run out, run across. There were never any cars there. Occasionally a car might come by, but...
How times have changed.
Times changed,
And projected into the future, that area is even going to, and Lancaster Street going down, it's going to be even busier, Lancaster Street, Central Street.
As compared to this morning, I went across the street to get into Al's car to come here. It took me, I don't know how many minutes to wait for the traffic so I could hurry up and get across in between the traffic.
Before you got run over.
So you gentlemen grew up in the Depression era.
That's right.
The late 20s, the 20s, or the
late
30s, and you were young fellows just before World War II, and we'll talk later on. But you all entered the service during World War II, and we'll discuss that after. Today, the area is developed. It's a mixture of residential and business. What was it like when you were boys, when you were little kids, and when you were children? Let me direct this, and we'll each take a turn. Lidio?
What was it like? It was just a very quiet neighborhood, and
A lot of woods,
a lot of woods. Yes, we spent most of our, as a lot of young boys, we spent most of our time in the woods rather than on the street, and.
With fields, gardens. Did everybody have a garden behind the house?
Just about everyone had a garden. In fact, I still have a garden, my father's garden, and I still cultivate it, and it's a pretty good sized garden. But that's been there from way back.
A lot of tomato plants.
Yeah.
Isn't it? A lot of tomatoes.
Right now I have just over 80 tomato plants right now.
And as Otto joked in the anteroom, he said, were you the fellow, were you giving out tomatoes there in the harvest season at the end of the season? But you still enjoy gardening? And,
I really enjoy it, yes.
And I know where your homestead was, and like there's still there is an apple tree in the front.
That apple tree's still there. It's an early Mac. And it's still, every other year, it bears an abundant supply of fruit.
So in those days, families, to supplement their food supply, had to have a garden.
That's right.
Everyone had a garden.
Everyone had a garden. Were there, did you have chickens? Did you have, I know my grandparents on Marguerite Avenue, the Patronellis, they had chickens, rabbits. There was, I don't remember raising pigs, but in the neighborhood there were, somebody raised.
I remember my dad, he used to go in with another family. They'd buy a pig and have this farmer raise that, had a pig farm. They'd raise the pig when it was full grown. They'd take and have it butchered, and they'd get half a piece.
Yeah.
With sausages, pork chops, whatever.
Prosciutto, too.
The only thing you didn't eat was the whistle.
That's
Well,
right.
you know, my father did that too. And the thrill of, if your father was doing the pig, then you, as a little boy, you had the privilege of holding the pig's tail. So we'd be in the back holding the pig's tail while they butchered the pig.
Thrill of a lifetime.
I went through the same thing when my father told me, "Now, when we butcher the pig, I'll let you hold the tail." But when I heard that pig scream, I never went close to that thing.
Again.
I stayed on the second floor porch and watched them kill the pig from up there.
I don't
But then
blame
we'd
you.
make then they'd go through making the sausages and all that.
And Allie, you, at your home, was there a period when there were like poultry was raised, where turkeys raised? And
Yeah, years ago, my father used to have chickens when we were younger, but then they raised turkeys for a while. I think it was 5 or 6 years they raised quite a few turkeys, and they did it for quite a while.
So in those days, to survive, and you survived very, very well, people had to, because there weren't a lot of jobs around, people had to grow food to
Supplement
their income.
their income. I imagine that the moms did a lot of canning and a lot of preserving.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know, to this day, my mother had put tomatoes in jars. There's still about a half a dozen jars, they're quart-sized jars with tomatoes in them. And I noticed about a week or so ago, one of the jars, the tomatoes are getting sort of overripe or rotten, but all the other tomatoes look very good. I'm almost tempted to open it and try to eat them.
Make sure you
something.
take a whiff before you you decide to consume
Have
those.
somebody else taste them for you.
Yeah.
Well, and talking about jars, I think I told Otto this before, but my mother and father canned or jarred peppers years ago. Okay, they're both gone now. I'm talking about several years ago. I still have them. If you like peppers, I've got plenty.
Still got those
Already
that-
dried. Never been opened.
Yeah. Well, you want to test them.
You talk about the canning. I remember the smells of the tomatoes when
Yeah.
they'd be getting up the
yeah.
tomatoes. That's still, you know, that wonderful. You know, you still
aroma, yeah, it's great.
those memories. The trolley tracks. Now, as a kid, I remember growing, and I grew up. I was born in 1942, and I grew up on Central Street, a little further up than you. I was near Cross Street, near that area, Central Court, Central Place. But I do remember as a kid seeing the trolley tracks in the street. No trolleys went by, and the street was paved. And then at some point, they were either taken up by the city, or paved over. I think they were probably removed.
A lot of them removed them for the iron, for the steel, yeah.
Now, in our little conversation out in the anteroom, Allie, as a little kid, maybe a 2-year-old, did
Yeah.
remember the trolley going by.
I remember a trolley going by, but then I don't remember any, after that period.
I
it was
remember
gone.
as a kid riding a trolley from downtown Leominster to Whalen.
To Whalen Park,
Yeah,
which
so
So it was
I was
working then.
probably 8 or 9 years old, so that's going back to the 30s, early 30s, late 20s, early 30s.
in the trolley
Yeah,
that
we're
time
running
was
to
still.
Whalen and Fitchburg and,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was a very extensive, when the trolleys were at their height, there was a very
Oh.
extensive
Yes,
trolley
the
system.
system there was, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
And the cars today are big, we have all kinds of modern conveniences. You can be in instant communication around the world with cell phones. We have TVs, we have refrigeration, air conditioning, central
GPS,
heating.
global positioning
Global
system.
positioning, all of
Yeah.
the computers. It's an amazing thing, but you fellas remember when there weren't
Oh, yeah.
those things. What was it like? There was radio, you remember radio.
Oh, yeah.
well, if a family had a phone, everyone in the neighborhood used it.
The,
Not everyone had a phone.
Right,
You know,
and
an
it was-
emergency, I mean,
Yeah.
for emergencies, not for any or to get in touch with relatives.
and there were party lines.
Yeah, oh
where-
yeah.
Not
Yeah,
private
you
right,
could have
that's right.
entertain yourself listening.
And there were multiple people
Yeah,
on the
4 or
phone.
5.
Could be
yeah.
2, 3, 5, who
People would
knows?
holler at you to get off the line.
You're right. Yeah, I remember that.
And there was, I remember from a previous interview that we did with Mrs. Pickford, Alice Pickford. She was a telephone operator,
Oh.
and
Oh.
there was a switchboard at that time.
Oh, yes.
And there are no such things today.
Now it's all-
and the phone numbers were extremely low. The
Yeah.
numbers in
Well, that's
in
right.
Leominster
It's just
were
5 digits, I
Very,
believe.
very low numbers.
Started with 3, then
Is
5.
that what it was?
Now it's up to who
It's-
knows what.
The Patton's Pond, that is no longer there, but Patton's Factory.
But the brook is still there.
The brook still goes there. It goes,
Goes underneath CVS, round the back, below Lincoln Terrace,
Terrace.
behind my house, all the way down to
Fall Brook, you know?
Fall Brook, I think. and-
it enters,
and,
it joins Fall Brook.
Brook
and
Yeah,
then-
way back.
and-
Central,
and
way
Fall
down
Brook
Central
eventually
Street.
goes
That's
into,
right.
into the Nashua.
Yeah.
But Patton's Pond was an industrial pond.
Right.
At the base of the terrace and behind the CVS, there was a dam down.
A little
The
further
brook.
down, yeah, it was, let me see, well, you know where the,
Oh, your
where the,
house is-
yeah, where my father's house is, right next door was Patton's shop. Right next door from that was Patton Pond. So that'd be almost across the street from the Ford Mercury garage, just
Okay.
a little more further beyond, okay, was
Yeah.
the pond and the dam.
And Patton's Pond, in the winter, there would be skating
Yeah.
on it.
Davey?
Oh,
Right.
yes.
But it was a pond that was dammed up to use the water power to run the machinery
And the factory.
in the
The
factory.
factory, yeah.
And what kind of what did Patton's manufacture?
I think combs and barrettes.
Combs and
stuff,
barrettes,
something.
woman's hair,
Clips, whatever
Clips
they
and so
call
forth.
them, yeah.
And it wasn't made out, Patton's didn't make it out of horn, animal
Celluloid,
horn.
wasn't it?
I think they use celluloid.
Celluloid
Yeah.
plastic.
Yeah.
But just a short distance from them was the horn supply,
Yeah.
horn and supply,
Yeah.
and they originally used
Originally
the
used
animal
cow
horns.
The horns from the cows and, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Cattle,
that's
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
cattle.
Yeah. And as I've said before, when the horn supply was in operation, even as a kid in the summertime, you
Oh,
would
the-
still
You knew it was
you knew
there,
it was
right?
there.
Well, all the refuse from the factories go in the brook,
Yeah.
right behind my father's, my house, all the way down to Fall Brook.
Because in those days,
They didn't
were
have
not-
any
They had
there were
control.
no
no
environmental
controls.
No controls at all,
controls
no.
and, yes, and the wetlands and ponds and
That's
so
right.
on would not couldn't drain. You couldn't treat them. Today we treat those natural resources with respect, but in those days it was just an easy way to get rid
I
of
remember
waste.
across from the Lincoln Mercury garage, now was the Chevrolet garage, and they had a dump across the street. by the brook. It was a dump. They filled it, they dumped stuff, then he'd cover it with sand and made a parking lot eventually, and it's all filled in now.
That's right.
Now, in that area, I remember your dad had a garage.
Yeah, yeah, down there, right across from where the state gas station is now there.
Now.
We were
Right.
right across the
That's
street
right.
where the strip mall is.
And there was a big sandbank. I think it was Latanzio's.
Latanzio's sandbanking, that's
My
right.
father and Latanzio's had the sandbank.
And
in the
I don't
backyard.
remember it, but I'm sure you fellows do, but Tisdale Street goes right up now from Central Street.
That's right.
But in those days,
It was all woods. It was just a path.
Was dead.
The
It was-
people that lived up there would go to work at DuPont's, and they'd come down through the woods on the path. And then the path got wider and wider until eventually it turned into be a road.
and then they extended
Tisdale.
it down.
Yep.
Tisdale Street ended at Carsey home, George Carsey's
At one
mother's
time,
house.
yeah.
That's where the Tisdale Street ended. It was nothing, woods and,
Yeah, you remember we used to go, we'd ski down the hill, we were sliding down the
That's
hill.
right.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Big hill. To us, it's a big hill.
yeah.
Now, as kids, you would venture into Lincoln Woods.
Yeah.
Which is still there. Lincoln
Still
Woods
there.
is an Audubon preserve,
Yeah.
and it's been preserved, a beautiful natural area. You'd sometimes go up through the woods to Samoset,
Yeah.
and
To
it was
Phyllis
really
Point.
woods then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Up through a fire road, you
yeah,
said?
it was a
or-
fire road. As a matter of fact, the fire road, my daughter has a house up there now. It's all houses on that street.
Which streets now would be?
Jesus, here we go.
I don't know what it's called.
They're off
It's not,
off Grant Street.
yeah, it's up at
Off Grant,
Grant.
and there are a number of streets, and off,
Yeah, there are.
it's all developed
It's
now.
all
it.
developed, Hawthorne, and
All,
they're
all
all
of those.
houses.
And so those would be places where you'd play cowboys and Indians
Yep.
in Lincoln Woods.
Yep.
And during my era, it was Davy Crockett because he
Right,
was
yeah.
popular in
Right, he was,
the
yeah.
early 50s. We used to go up there and we'd build forts there. And
That's right.
what about down a little beyond where Lydia, you were right at the now where Tisdale Street goes up, but go up over the hill where the Central Street has been straightened out to where the Meadowbrook
Yeah.
mobile home park is. Fallbrook goes under the road
Yes.
and goes through there. Was there what was Trage's pool?
Right there.
Right there.
It was there on
The brook
the,
made
On
the-
Route 12, on the,
On the
going
mobile
down,
12.
going to Worcester was on the left side.
the
They
left
dammed
side.
it up and.
It was dammed, and what
It was dammed and the brook filled it up, and that's where we went swimming.
And the kids, was it a popular swimming
Oh,
place?
Yeah.
Very
for-
popular.
It didn't last long, but it was there but we enjoyed it while it was
Yeah, a
there.
couple of years or
Yeah.
so.
When the war came, then it disappeared.
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Was there any connection to Mr. Frank Trager, the local?
Yeah, I think he's the one that
developer
did it.
He's the one that built it. so
He's the
they
one that
called
built it for the
Fraser
kids,
Pool.
for us.
Right, and he also didn't he build the Plymouth Theater and
Yes.
the
Metropolitan City.
Rialto Theater?
Yeah, I
and,
think you're right.
Doyle Field.
Yeah,
I
he
think
was quite a
built-
contractor.
Yes,
Doyle.
was a-
He baptized one of my brothers.
so he was of Italian American.
He was a
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, Kumbati. He was Italian American
Yeah.
heritage too. And speaking of that, were there lots of O'Reillys and O'Rourkes in your neighborhood, or the
I don't remember.
Irish Americans? That's the way it was then. The Irish Americans
They mostly
were
were on
in
the-
the Plains area. The
French were on the hill.
French people were on French Hill.
We were on Central and Union.
That's
The-
And the Yankees were up on the west side.
English Yankees
Yeah,
were on the
everybody-
west
we all
side.
segregated, more or less.
Yeah.
That's the way it was. And
That's how it was.
all of those folks, were all Americans. All were
Oh, yeah.
nation of
Yeah.
immigrants.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful.
That's- yeah.
And,
The only time we all mixed when we got to junior high school.
And that's
because
where
we
the-
had our neighborhood school.
That's right.
Then we went
That's
to
right.
May Gallagher.
Gallagher.
and We integrated with
Yeah.
the rest of the city.
which is
all
a
of us.
wonderful thing,
Yeah.
'cause,
Yeah, it was.
Got
that's
to
what
know other
America's all
people.
about. America
Yeah.
is a nation of immigrants.
That's right.
And your grandparents certainly, and I know my grandparents, were off the boat.
Yeah.
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 Now
Yeah.
mine were my grandparents on both sides came from Italy, and then and you're older
Yeah.
than I am. Did all of your grandparents?
My mother was born here, but my father came.
Arnaldina.
Yeah,
Can I tell you
my,
something?
huh?
My mother was born here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
my mother-
father
And
came.
then
My
when she
father
was
came.
2 or 3 years old, her parents moved back to Italy. And she lived there for about 12, 15 years until she was about 17. Then she came to this country to marry my father.
That happened very, very frequently.
Yeah.
My dad, Anna,
Yeah.
was she born in Brown Station too? Or
New York, yeah.
Brown Station,
Yeah,
New York.
yeah, when they were up there building a
Right,
dam
the
or
Italians were
something,
building
I forget
some
what
right
project.
And then I learned something new about my dad. One time he told me that then I guess they went back to Italy for a short time, for a very short time. I didn't know that. I guess
No.
he and Arnaldina,
Yeah,
your mom,
yeah.
and then they came back.
Came
and settled
back here and relocated.
But
My mother was born here too.
your mom was
My
born.
father came from Italy, but my mother was born here.
Yeah. So it's wonderful that we're a nation
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
immigrants
Yeah.
and
All nationalities.
all
yeah,
nationalities,
yeah.
a melting pot.
Yeah.
The melting pot, which is a wonderful thing. The spare grass field. I have been asked to inquire about a an area of
Yeah.
where you used to frequent called the spare grass field,
Yeah.
which
We used to play baseball there.
which is really asparagus.
Yes.
And where was the spare grass
You're
field?
right.
Yeah.
Where
that's
solar
what it was
chemical
called,
is
spare
now.
gra- spare
Where,
grass.
where solar chemical
Chemical
is
is
now.
now.
Oh, in
Yeah.
Ticonderoga.
Ticonderoga.
Not Ticonderoga.
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's I forget the name of the company.
Yeah, it
It's
was all
changed, so-
plastic.
so-
Right in that
with
area.
Glass
yeah.
off the railroad tracks
That's
off
right.
Marguerite Avenue.
Yeah.
Which when I was a kid, it was very sandy, of course, all
Yeah.
built on sand, the glacial sand. And then when I was a kid, the Little League field was built there, which
First
was a big
one
deal,
there
the first
was
Little
built
League
there,
field.
I
yeah.
think you're right.
Yeah.
But I think that why it was called the Sparegrass Field is that I know asparagus has to be cultivated in sand,
Sandy
and that was
soil,
all
yeah.
sand.
Yeah.
And my grandparents, they took over the house at the top of Marguerite
Yeah.
Hill,
Yeah.
my Patronelli grandparents, and I remember that before them, I think that whole area was the Fuller greenhouses. And they may have cultivated,
Oh, yeah.
the Fullers.
Could have been,
May
yeah.
have
I don't
cultivated.
recall.
But that's
because
what got his name. You're right.
I think so.
That's what got his name.
So there are all these little bits of history that
Yeah.
are interesting. Where did your folks shop? Today we have supermarkets and grocery stores. Where was the shopping done? I'll go right
Go ahead.
from left to right. Lydio.
Well, for groceries, we did our shopping in the area that we lived. We did our grocery shopping up at Lincoln Terrace, and it was the Italian Colonial Grocery Store.
How'd you get across the brook?
There was just a couple of logs and then a couple of planks at the beginning, so you have to walk across the planks to go across the brook.
And then up
when
the
you're
hill.
coming back down the hill with bags of groceries, you had to be careful and balance yourself across that brook.
So you wouldn't
in,
fall
in
in the
later
brook.
years, I don't know, probably in the 40s, someone, I don't even remember who, built a little bridge there. It was a plank. It was about 3 or 4 feet wide with a railing on one side, so it was easy to walk on.
Okay. Was there another supermarket within walking distance? And I know the answer to this.
Well,
up the
Janelle's
street.
was up
Janelle's
the
was the.
Janelle's
up the
Market.
street, Yeah.
But we didn't do our grocery shop. We just bought goodies there.
Yeah, we didn't
At
buy
Janelle's.
grocery there.
But most of the food for the table was
The Italian
Italian
cooperative.
colonial.
and what you
And what came out of the
What you
garden.
raised.
what you
Yeah,
raised, what
yeah,
you
yeah, chickens
chicken.
and
Yeah.
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 what have you.
Oh, that's right.
You
I
got the
never-
eggs, the
I
Yeah,
never
chicken.
that's
ate
right.
chicken. I never had chicken outside of the house until I was in the Army. It's the first time I had cooked chicken, and I didn't like the taste. I wasn't used to it because we always had fresh chicken, and there's
this
not a
was-
difference between fresh chicken and what you buy in the store.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and everything was homegrown pretty much.
Homegrown,
and,
you had chickens, you got the eggs, you wanted the chicken, you went
Yeah.
out and.
Oh, fresh
Yeah.
eggs.
Yeah.
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 So that's a big contrast
Yeah,
today.
today you go-
Lydia, you still have a garden, but you do it
Yes.
for enjoyment, and it's
Well,
more
enjoyment,
of a
I
hobby.
do for my son,
Yeah,
for his restaurant.
And for his restaurant, Lydia's a
Yeah.
commercial, a free commercial.
Yeah. I
along
didn't wanna mention that,
the last stop on the Manja Mile, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, Lydia's restaurant. Okay.
That'll be $20.
Yeah.
I know a big part of entertainment in those days. Today, we want music. We pop in tapes, the radio,
Yeah.
TV, the CDs. In those days, music wasn't like today.
Yeah, I know.
And we have we sadly we don't have a banjo today, because if we did, we might have a banjo solo.
That's right, but Otto Palazzi.
Just not Otto, your career on the banjo lasted
over. Before it started.
about a year, and
Yeah.
you could play one song. What was it?
Yeah.
Oh Susanna.
Oh, Susanna.
Oh Susanna.
Yeah.
That was
Oh, yeah.
something to start it up again.
No, Bob, what we can do, we'll do is we'll televise just his solo. Then
That-
I'll have them put it right in the
Don't
film.
expect cards.
Edit it right in.
Just print it.
And he'll open the program with it.
But I know that Al,
Yeah.
you are a practiced musician,
Yeah.
a professional musician, and music is so important.
I've been
to your
playing
life.
for years.
Lydia's sister Annie, with whom I work on the Historical Commission.
Yes.
Your sister Ann, when we were chit-chatting, she remembers as a girl, in the summertime it must have been, when everything is open, she remembers Allie practicing and hearing him practicing.
Oh, yes.
And it was a very fond memory.
Yeah.
So that whole topic of how people in those days got their music, and some very interesting stories about that. So, and I know, Otto, your dad was part of
Yeah,
a
he
musical
played,
group.
yeah.
But Allie, can you expound
Elaborate
on
on
that
it?
a little bit? Elaborate
Well,
on that, please.
I was a normal kid. I used to practice, but I used to hate to practice. But to be good, to play good, you got to practice. Do anything, you got to do it. But my father'd get after me. Not my mother, but my father would. As my father's the reason why I'm playing today. Because he made me practice so I'd sound good. And eventually what happened is I got to like it so much myself. Then I used to practice more than he'd like to hear me practice. And then he'd tell me, when you going to stop? In other words, we
Yeah.
want to go to bed.
Take a break.
Yeah, take a break.
But that,
But it was that way.
and it paid off, because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have a musical family,
Oh,
and
yeah.
gifted musicians.
No, it
and-
has. It has. And let me tell you something. It helped pay a lot of bills when I was first married.
Ah,
It really did. So
So-
it was a big. I've never been sorry that I learned how to play.
it's a wonderful gift.
You meet a lot of nice people, and it's a terrific hobby.
Sure is. And Otto, your dad played.
The clarinet and the double bass. My mother played the violin, and I was left-handed or left-footed or something. I was not musically inclined at all.
And Arnoldina, your sister, played the violin.
Yeah.
You said, and
Yeah,
Uncle
yeah.
Butch,
Played,
your
yeah.
dad played.
Yeah,
Now
played.
and Lydia, did you have musicians in?
Beg your pardon?
Did you have musicians? Anybody musical in your family?
No one, no. I was the listener. I'd go over while I was practicing, and we wanted to play. I'd go and sit in the front pile, and I'd be sitting there nice and quiet and listening to him practice.
Well,
then
that's
we'd go out.
the listener is an essential part of the musical experience
Yeah.
too. So.
And,
Yeah.
in fact, a lot of people, when we were growing up, a lot of people thought I was a musician, and they'd ask me, when are you guys playing next? I said, I don't know, I don't play.
Would they now? I know this. You mentioned earlier how they a custom that is long gone, but
Yes.
the musicians would get together, the little
Yeah.
groups, and what would they do?
Well, my father and his friends, they played guitar or mandolin. He'd tell me, look, we're going up to, whenever a girl was going to get married in those days, the typical custom was to go serenade the girl prior to the wedding, like 2 weeks before the wedding at the house. So he'd drag me along, bring the accordion, and I'd play the accordion, and he'd play, he used to sing. My father sang a lot, but he also played the accordion and the double bass in the band. But we'd go serenade the girl at the bride's house, and they'd feed the musicians, and we'd have a jolly time, and then that was it. But we did that for, you know, for quite a few girls that got married in those days. But they don't do that anymore.
No,
that custom's long gone.
That custom
It was a
is
nice.
gone.
It was a really a nice custom. It was a happy occasion.
It must have been, and,
Yeah.
and would like I know that in those days Sundays were a big day when families would
Yeah.
would get together. Would they make music on Sundays? Provide their own music, and
Yeah, yeah.
I know the gatherings were.
I remember my father and mother used to play at different houses when there was either a christening or a girl making a communion or a kid making something like that. And everybody would go to the house, you know. I remember went everywhere with them. My sister and I, they drug us wherever they played, we went with them.
You know, but Bob, I wanted to make a comment when you're talking about he would listen to me practice. He wanted to, and I'd want to go out and play baseball. My father wouldn't let me go until I practiced. My father used to tell me, never mind baseball, practice. If he only knew what the ball players got today.
That's
Whoa, he's turning his grade.
Well, what if you weren't as good in baseball as you are
Yeah,
in
that's right.
music?
Yeah,
What
you're right,
would
yeah.
you want then?
Yeah.
and just it's very timely now talking about players what they get.
Astronomical.
Mr. Rodriguez,
yeah.
I know.
Alex Rodriguez
Yeah.
just got a huge
Yeah.
What, like 276 million over 10
7-year
years?
contract, and which
I mean,
is for,
that's more than some countries' budget.
Yes, it is. But it's wonderful. But again, for the Sox fans and the future Leominsterites, there's been a lot. Maybe 100 years from now, when people are viewing this in Leominster, maybe the Red Sox will have won a World Series by then. Another
Well,
one.
I hope I live long enough to see that.
I hope we all see that. Which is, they are in contention, and maybe it'll be this coming year.
Yeah, maybe it will.
Well, let's hope for you, Red Sox fan.
He's a Yankee fan,
Oh,
Bob.
Otto, you're a Yankee fan.
Die-hard Yankee fan from the era of Joe DiMaggio.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, all
Good era.
wonderful.
That was a good era.
Yeah. Well, they had him, Teddy Williams,
Yeah.
Dan Musial. They were some great ball players.
And you fellas remember all those?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All of those.
Yeah.
They were playing them.
Well,
They
that
were
was our entertainment then. A lot of
active-
entertainment. I got interested in football games and baseball. I never got into hockey that much.
No.
I don't think that was the popular
Big
sport
factor
that it
thing is this
became.
today. No.
And how times have changed, and it's a positive change, but soccer was unheard of in those days, and now it is a
right.
very popular
That's
sport.
right. All right.
Big thing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your parents did what for work? What did your parents do for work? Times have changed. Today there were a lot of manufacturing jobs then in Leominster, different types of manufacturing, and that manufacturing in the United States in 2004, jobs are going out of the country.
Yeah.
But then jobs were plentiful.
Yes.
Lydia, what did...
Well, of course, my father always worked at DuPont. My mother was majority of the time a homekeeper, but she did a lot of sewing. She was very good at sewing, and a lot of times, now that I think of it, she would make wedding outfits for the girls that got married. She'd make the wedding gown and for the best maid of honor and all the other girls.
So she was
And
a
she would
seamstress.
sew all their clothing. Yes.
Yeah.
She didn't get that much money, but she was kept pretty busy. In fact, her sewing machine is still useful in the house, and all her threads, there are drawers full of threads, and I keep looking at them, and I say I should throw this thread away, but I can't make myself throw it away. It's still
No, you won't.
must be hundreds of spools of different colored threads.
I'll bet it was a Singer sewing machine.
Yes, oh yes,
The,
a good one too.
Yeah, the foot pedal.
Well, the
or
first
then they
one was a foot pedal, now
then
it's
they
electric.
electrified it.
Yeah, they electrified them. Yeah.
But your Otto, you mentioned now again, your parents. You were growing up during the Depression era, and jobs were very, very scarce. Otto, you mentioned that your dad, my Uncle Butch, had to.
He went to Springfield for a while. He just come home weekends, working, I don't know, railroads out there, tough work. And then finally he came back and he went to work at DuPont's as a steam fitter. And he worked there a few years, and quite a few years, and then he started the gas station. And then when that got going pretty well, he just went to the gas station.
Did the gas station also for a while manufacture cement blocks or cinder
My
blocks?
grandfather did in the
Grandfather
back.
did, in the back.
My
So
grandfather,
that,
Joe,
okay. Is it,
he made blocks out
Oh, I
back, one at
remember
a
that.
time.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I do too.
one at a time.
Yeah.
He had a farm, made one
Yeah.
block at a time,
wow.
and it was hard work because he mixed all the ingredients, the cement,
cement.
the sand, by hand, then put it in the machine, made the block, put it on these rows of planks to dry,
Wow.
Yeah.
How much did he sell the blocks
and then
for?
my job was to, they were sitting on there, they dry up in a few hours, to tip them up on their side carefully and get the plates off so he could use them the next morning.
Another mold
Yeah, and
for
be
the.
careful you don't chip any blocks.
How much did he sell the blocks for?
Not
Those
too
days.
much.
Not too much.
Quarter
Pennies.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll bet those blocks. There are a number of them still in
Oh,
some of
yeah.
the buildings
A
around.
lot of his blocks up for service merchandise in Fitchburg there in downtown.
I remember where, I know where that
It's
is.
on the corner.
Sure.
We had to make special blocks because it went around the corner there.
Oh.
You know, that building's still
Still
there.
there,
And
so-
there's a school up to South Side.
That
It used to be
incorporates.
it used to be a nun's home. Now it's Fitchburg School. Some of our blocks went in there.
So those are incorporated in there.
He
Very
worked
interesting.
hard. He was a hard
Oh,
worker.
they certainly were. And Allie,
My father worked at DuPont's. My mother worked at DuPont's in the assembly and packing. My father worked in a department called the sheeting room. But it turned his life, when the hurricane came through New England, it turned his life right around because he was a carpenter by trade. And when that hurricane blew all those trees down and wrecked houses on, he went back to carpenter work, never went back to DuPont, and did that for the rest of his life.
carpentry.
Built houses,
Building
you know,
houses.
He did that for the rest of his life.
That 1938 hurricane, in a number of the interviews I've done, that's something the kids who grew up in that era and the people, they did that because that was really a devastating thing.
Oh, it was.
What can you tell me about? What are your memories about that day, that time, Lydio?
My memories is we were young boys. I don't even remember how old I was then, but my memories of the hurricane, where we spent most of our time in the wood, climbing the trees that had fallen, and
In
they were
Lincoln
easy
Woods.
to climb now. We'd be playing the branches, and that was my memory of the hurricane.
The hurricane, yeah, because there was devastation.
The aftermath,
and,
right.
The aftermath of it. Otto,
Well, I remember we lived on Central Street then, and we were standing on the porch watching this, and there was more debris in the air. We never realized how dangerous it was being out there. But there was more debris flying around the air. It was unbelievable. Never seen anything like that in my life. Never.
and we realize today through TV and through
Yeah.
the hurricanes and
Oh,
the
yeah.
reporting that everybody should have been hunkered down
Down cellar,
down cellar,
somewhere.
but
Yeah,
this
we were out
debris-
there watching.
watching it because it was something
Something,
that
yeah.
was unexpected.
Didn't realize how
didn't know it was
dangerous it was.
coming.
Yeah.
Didn't know it was coming because there
That's a
wasn't
good point. What he just said was right. You didn't know it was coming.
right
Yeah.
because now we have the radar and
Yeah.
the satellites, and
you
it was a
know,
surprise.
I got a
It was
warning
shock.
about these things. You
Yeah.
know, you see, you didn't know how foolish you were standing
Yeah.
out there.
Well, Allie, did
Yeah.
we, during the hurricane, I remember vaguely taking off my sneakers, we didn't have sneakers, and running barefoot during the hurricane outside and on the street where the water was running down on the gutters there. We'd be running up and down in the brook.
Yeah, but
and
wait a
was it
minute.
you and I, were
Are
we
you
doing that
confusing?
together?
Yeah, wait, we had the flood of 36. You're not confusing that with the flood of 36. Remember? We had the flood.
Yeah.
The flood. There was a flood in devastating flood in New
30,
England.
I think it was 36. Wasn't it 2 years before
Yes.
the hurricane?
Oh.
And there were some bridges that got washed
Yes.
out in Leominster.
Nashua
That's a
River
memory I've
down
got.
on Mechanic Street,
Yeah,
that
that-
was washed out.
But then, so that was perhaps the
That might have been the flood.
flood of
mainly.
36.
Well, I don't remember exactly, but all I remember is I visualize now being a little boy rolling up my pants, barefooted, and I think Allie we were just running up and down the street in the water, splashing our feet in the water. That's my memory of it.
That was probably in the 36, because if you had been out in the hurricane of 38, you might have ended up in
on top of a tree.
on top of a tree. Although Otto didn't. Otto was out watching.
We're watching on
rain.
the porch,
On
which
the
was
porch.
foolish.
On the hurricane. The hurricane.
But again, people we didn't know
Didn't
what it was.
realize,
It was a
yeah.
phenomenon that we weren't used to around here.
That's why I pointed that out when you said nobody knew it was coming. I was at a friend's house, Bobby Beauregard. We were in the same grade in school. We were practicing together. He played trumpet, I played the piano. Then I had to walk home. This was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm walking home, and it was windy. You know, I said, boy, this wind is really going, kicking up. Then I saw the sign go like this. When I saw that and I saw the limbs bending, I got home fast enough to look out my back window and see some roofs, or part of roofs with the terrace, being blown right off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And then I knew
then
it wasn't just a regular storm.
Right.
And
This
then,
was
of course, the
something
devastation
special.
was
Yeah.
terrible.
Yes. That had many of the people that I've interviewed in previous programs. That's been an unforgettable experience. Nearing the conclusion of our program today, near the end of the 30s, and then very approaching 1940, that era. In 1941, there was a dramatic event in world history. The war, the Pearl Harbor,
Yeah.
World War II. Now, each of you gentlemen served our nation, and we thank you for your service. That was the big war, as you.
The big one.
The
yeah.
big
big one, WW2.
Yeah.
We're very, very grateful for your service. Tell us something about that. Now, Lydio, you went into the what?
I was in the Army. When all broke out, I was I'm the youngest of the three here, and I wasn't 17 yet when I graduated from high school. So I couldn't go into service. I wasn't going to volunteer. So my uncle, Traja, that we talked about earlier, had put up an audition down at Harvey's Machine Shop, Guy P. Harvey Machine Shop. So he got me a job working there at nights, and as a result of working there, they got a deferment. So I got deferred for about 2 years. And then I got tired of that because all my friends were in the Army. And I told the boss, I quit. I don't want to work here anymore. You're going to go in the Army. I don't care. I quit, and 2 days later, within a week, I got my draft notice and I went in the Army.
Went to the Army.
And so that's how I got in.
And Otto.
I was in the Navy, Naval Aviation. I served most of my time on a carrier as an ordnanceman. And it was a great experience, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
In the Pacific?
Yeah.
Pacific.
Yeah, we were in the Pacific. Never got the air, I think, yeah.
And Allie.
It just so happens that I worked at Guy P. Harvey's about the same time Lydio did, and I got deferred 2 years. And after being deferred 2 years, I felt guilty because all my friends were in the service. So I told the company, I didn't tell the company, I went to Boston and took an Air Force exam to be a pilot, navigator, and bomber, and I passed. And so I told my boss, I'm all done. I'm going in the service. And I ended up going to a pilot navigator school in the Army Air Force. Never saw any combat because while I was going through training, the war ended. So they let us all out after 21 months of service.
21 months of service. And again, for any of the listeners, we have veterans in Leominster, we people of my era, I was never in the service, but I appreciate, and we all appreciate your service and subsequent service of other people who've served in Korea, in Vietnam, and in the Gulf Wars,
all the
who are currently serving.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we thank you for that. And the citizens of Leominster, of the present and of the future, appreciate that too. So, gentlemen, thank you.
Fine.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else that you gentlemen would like to share with our audience, LATV audience, before we conclude this interview?
Well, I just might mention, it might be of interest, but the house that I lived in when I was a young boy used to be in the center of town, in Leominster here. And the factory that was next door at that time was called Patton Works. The owner of the factory liked the house so much he had it moved from the center of Leominster down to where it is right now. And it's been there now 85 years.
So
House.
that's an historic house.
Yeah.
And he had it moved. Was it Mr. Patton? I assume it was Mr.
Right,
Patton,
yeah,
the
it was
owner of the factory.
he lived in it,
And then
finally, of course, he died, and the factory was empty, and my father bought it from either the Visco or DuPont company for $2,300 at the time.
at the time, so
And then he fixed it up.
Now, that jogs my memory, and I'm sure it will jog your memory. That Patton's factory, and the pond is no longer there, and the factory is no longer there.
Right.
There was a memorable event, I'm sure, in your childhood growing up. What happened to Patton's factory?
The factory
burnt.
burnt down.
Burnt down, I think.
It was a huge fire.
It was a huge fire,
We
that's
stayed
right.
up all night long watching those flames, watching the fire, all the people around.
In fact,
We're just fascinated by the flames.
let me see. What's her name?
Eva?
Aldo's mother. What's Aldo's mother's name? Remember Aldo? Right up the street?
Casagrande?
Yeah. His
Okay.
mother came down to wake us up. She saw the fire. We were still sleeping in the house. She come up, but we had just about waking up at that time. She come knocking on the window. Get out of the house, there's a fire next door. And we looked out.
and it was a huge fire.
What a
And-
shock that was.
When we did an interview with, they were Eva and Olga Capone
Oh, yes, I
at
remember
the time.
them,
Yeah.
But when they were girls,
Yeah.
Olga Sapola and Eva Maroney, their married names, they remember the Patton factory, and they
Oh.
remember even feeling. Eva remembered getting frightened because of the flames,
Oh,
the
yeah.
heat of the flames, because
It
they
was-
lived up on.
No,
Eva and Olga
it
lived
was
up on the
yeah.
terrace, so
Quite a
that was
fire.
quite a.
In fact, we went across the street to go to Treasure's house, our family, to watch the firemen keep our house from burning down.
Yeah.
And to put the flames out.
They
on
had
Patton.
to spray your house.
They had to
in
spray the
order
house
to-
with water to keep from burning down.
Just a little. Were the fire engines then? Were they? I know it's not fair to ask, but I mean, were they the? By then they would have been. Well, were they? Were they still the horse-drawn, or were they the?
You know,
No,
I
they
don't
weren't
know.
horse-drawn.
I don't
They
remember.
would have been the
I don't think so.
gasoline engine.
Yeah.
But talking
Yeah.
about horse-drawn, I'm just going to interject this now.
Sure.
I can remember when I was a small boy, and I think you too, they used to plow the sidewalks with a horse-drawn sleigh, with the plow at an angle to plow the snow on the road, you know. It was horse-drawn, and he used to plow the sidewalks that way.
And
That goes back.
Yeah,
Remember that?
yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Jim Gardner had mentioned that.
Did
when
he
we
mention
the
that?
Bowery. He recalls
Oh,
that.
I remember that.
And yeah, what a change today.
Oh.
And they had commented in that interview that they didn't care that much about plowing the streets. It was the sidewalks which were more important when he was a little kid, because people did a lot of
Nobody had
cars. People walking.
In his era, there weren't a lot of cars.
No, yeah.
So, it was more important to get the sidewalks cleared so people could get to where
That's
they were
right.
going.
That's
So,
true, yeah.
so the changes that you gentlemen have lived through are
Amazing.
amazing when you think of it. From when you were little kids and how things were done then, the conveniences or lack of conveniences at home, and now we live in the modern time where we have a vehicle on the moon. We have a couple of vehicles not on the moon now, but on Mars.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, and you wonder what 100 years from now things will be like.
You know, another thing I'd like to just mention, because it goes back to my early childhood. Like his father and mother, when they had the gas station, my grandfather and grandmother had a station
Yeah.
right before
up
the
the
state
hill.
road, Tossy
Yeah,
Station.
Tossy,
gas
yes.
It
station.
used to be
Yeah,
Tossy
Tossy,
fuel
yeah.
oil, and then
Yes,
finally
I-
they started the plastic business, and all this has changed. It's all changed. But
Yeah.
I when I was a kid, the gas station was still there,
Yes.
and I remember the tanks.
that's right, in the back
I
there.
think I remember the
Yeah.
tanks, and
Yeah.
I remember your grandfather, when they first started the oil company, had a pickup truck with a
Yep.
275-gallon tank in the back. He used to take a 5-gallon bucket
That's
and
right.
dispense it at 5-gallon quantities.
He's right. He's
Yeah.
right. That's how you
Yeah.
started, yeah.
And I remember as a little kid, my mom working. She was pretty much she was a stay-at-home mom, but she did work for
She
a
worked-
while.
she worked for me.
And she worked down.
Oh, yeah, your mother worked for me for quite a while.
Ah,
Oh, yeah, I remember your mother well.
yeah.
Yeah.
She was a good worker.
She
My
Very
mother
nice
used to
woman.
do
Sure
homework.
was.
Combs and berets, women's hair clips and stuff. We used to card them at home.
Yes, yes.
That's
We'd all
right.
sit around the table. And
Now
they'd
that's
dump-
just
they'd
elaborate
dump-
on that a little bit, because that was what do you call homework?
Yeah, they called it homework.
Yeah,
right.
right.
People did it nights at their leisure when, you didn't have TV in those days. You had radio if you were lucky. So they dump all these combs and stuff, and you get all these cards, and
It would come from the plastics
yeah,
factories from
yeah.
Patton
They
or wherever,
drop
and
them
then
off
you'd
to you, and then they pick them up the next
next
day.
day,
You know,
and
it
that
was
was
Yeah.
it was a means of additional income for
Yeah.
the family without moving out of the house,
Yeah.
which was nice.
During that
Made it a lot
time.
easier for them.
Because, you know, they
a
had
lot of them
kids
couldn't work. They had
like
kids growing up.
Right.
Yeah, it worked out good.
Well, women couldn't get out because they had the kids, not like today.
That's
You
right,
know,
yeah.
things have changed. You got daycares, you got this. You didn't have that.
not in those days, not in those days. And they were very good mothers, and they brought up excellent
Yeah.
families.
They did,
and we
they did a
have
good job.
excellent fathers and mothers, as there are today too.
Yeah.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a
Well, it's got to
wonderful.
be family oriented.
It was very,
not
very family oriented.
worth it.
But even
That's
that's
absolutely
changing.
true. The family, Otto. Lydio,
Yes.
Otto,
Yep.
and Ally, I want, on behalf of LATV and the Leominster audience, to thank you, our viewing audience, to thank you very much for sharing your memories of the Central Street neighborhood, growing up in that neighborhood in Leominster. And we appreciate your being here. And also, as always, I want to thank the Leominster audience, the viewing audience, for their attention, and the folks at the LATV studios, Kyle Pimerini, Jack Sully, Kevin Morin, and all the other folks who make our neighborhood snapshot programs
it was a pleasure.
possible. So,
It was a pleasure.
gentlemen, I thank you very much.
It was a
Ally,
pleasure, Bob.
same here.
Our pleasure.
Otto,
Yeah, it was
Otto,
interesting.
Lydio, thank you very
very
much.
nice.